Welcome back to Communicology. Have you ever heard the phrase that you can have it good, fast, or cheap, but you only get to pick two? Well, if you work in any kind of production field, you've probably heard this phrase, or at least you felt it. Let's talk about what that means. But first, I would appreciate greatly if you would click like, share, or subscribe. I'd love the help with the YouTube algorithm. Let's get into our conversation today. So, the phrase that you can pick between good, cheap, or fast, and that you only get to pick two, is a very common kind of concept that we wrestle with. And if you've ever done any kind of production work, you've probably felt this issue come your way, because it doesn't matter whether you're doing carpentry or writing or anything else. I mean, you know what it takes to do good work, and you know what it takes to do fast work, and you know what it takes to do cheap work. Now, how can you choose between the two? Well, that's a good question. It's usually pushed back onto the consumer, the purchaser, because at the end of the day, you know that something's going to give whenever you go one direction or another, because you only get to pick two. So, for example, if you want to do something good, think about what it means to do good work. We say it flippantly all the time. Good job. Thumbs up. Yay, good job to you. But what does it really mean to do a good job? I mean, again, we flippantly say it. We don't think about the ramifications of the phrase, that to do a good job, to be good at what you do. Now, we also love our superlatives. So we say like good, better, best, and things like that. So we love those kind of things. So good gets lowered. But to be good, it's like sometimes Christians will wrestle in the Bible and say that only God is good. It's like, well, I hope he's better than good. Well, that's our American thinking of rank and order. But the idea of being good, what does that mean? So if you were to do a good job, what work, what effort, what diligence do you have to put in being good? How much training did it take for you to be able to do good work? How much schooling did you have to do to be able to do good work? And it's a difficult thing to try to explain to people that it's not simple. Photography is one of those kind of things. Everyone takes pictures. Thanks to our smartphones, everyone takes tons and tons of pictures. And everyone thinks, oh, yeah, I can take photography well. And then you start working through some basic things, and they start realizing, actually, I'm fairly lousy. So the people who are really good at photography, and I don't consider myself, I'm much more of a video guy than a photo guy, but I can hold my own with photography. But the people who are good at photography, they've been doing it a long time. They have mastered their equipment. They have mastered the learning of it, and they were always pushing themselves to get better at it, to try new things. And that's what it takes to be good. So I'm, in that regard, I'm just okay. So, and I know that, and I'm okay with that. Now, there are certain things that I am good at doing, and there's lots of things that I'm just okay at doing. Hence the phrase, jack of all trades, master of none. I mean, because it's really hard to master a lot of things. You can be good at one thing, two things, maybe a few things, but to truly be good, is hard. It's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to be good. So when someone says, I want it good, we have to take a moment to say, well, how do you define good? One of the key things in debate is to set your terms early. That way you're debating the same terms, because if you're not talking the same thing, it varies. So someone who might say good, like, I want you to build a deck for me. I want it to be good. Well, what do you mean good? Good as in of good quality, that it'll last for 30 years? Do you mean good as in, the idea that it will fit my needs? I want to be able to have this many people on it and have my grill over here and my patio furniture over there. What do you mean by good? Do you mean good as in the fit and finish is absolutely perfect, like you don't see any blemishes? Do you mean, what do you mean by good? And it's good to have those kind of discussions up front, because everyone has their idea of what good is. And if you've ever tried to price a contractor, you'll find out real quick there's varying, levels of prices out there, and you're wondering why such a disparity. Well, some people, have more time and effort into their tools and into their people, and it's just one of those things that, and also in themselves, so they know they have to charge an X dollar premium to get that kind of value out of it. And some of them, might have very little overhead and they can charge less. But the idea is at the end, which one is good at doing that project? And a person who's good at building a deck might be lousy at building, a shed, because they know how to build a deck really well, but a shed is just not their thing, or vice versa. And in the end, the client's like, what's the difference? A shed, a deck, they're both made of wood. How hard can it be? Well, there are lots of little tips and tricks, because a deck is just its own little device. Where you start building a shed, you have to worry about the roof and all these other angles that come on top of that, and all these little issues that come into play with being a shed. Again, it's not like they're like necessarily rocket science, but to be good at it, you focus at being good at the one. So whatever trade you do or whatever skill you have, think of it. How hard did you have to work to be good? So then fast. Fast is another thing. Some people are really good at working fast. Some people are very slow and methodical. And neither one is wrong. It's just two different ways of doing it. Some people take their time and they make sure painstakingly that they cross every T and dot every I. And they just pour into it, and they double check it, triple check it, quadruple check it, and make sure it's really good. I love building. I wouldn't call myself any kind of a master builder of things like decks and porches. I've done it, and it's a lot of fun for me, and I love the challenge, and I love being outside, and I love working with my hands. But my problem is I'm not fast. I'm terribly slow. The old adage, measure twice, cut once, because, once you cut it, you can't go back. You can't add wood back to it. So measure twice to make sure, and then cut it that one time. I measure like 7 times, because I'm just, am I sure? Am I sure? I want to make sure this is right. It fits in perfectly when you slide that board into place. It's just where it's supposed to be. No wibble wobble anywhere. It's perfect. So I'm very slow. I'm very meticulous whenever I build, and there's nothing wrong with that, of course. But when it comes down to being fast, you know what it means to be fast. Some people get so good at their craft, they can do it faster. Do I need to measure 7 times? Probably not. I can probably measure twice and be good enough. And sometimes, you might even get to where you can measure once and be so confident and so skilled that once is good enough. Boom, cut it, go. And from there, it work forward. That's where I am with certain things. I can do certain things fast, but certain things are slower. Certain things I want to be slow. Like if I go into have brain surgery, I don't want a fast doctor. I want, take your time, please, by all means, take your time before you start scooping around in there and working through the gray matter. Take your time. But if we want fast, and there's certain things we need fast, like we are on a deadline, we need it fast. You can see that kind of thing coming about with your skill set. Now, also, if you know your trade and you know fast, sometimes fast can mean cut corners. Like maybe do this instead of that. Maybe be okay with a board that's not cut perfectly the right way. Or maybe in like a document that you're writing, you only spend 1 time proofreading instead of 3 or 4 times going over it. There's sometimes corners get cut, and that's what happens, and we end up to be faster. Again, cutting corners, you think of running a race. If we have a square, cutting that corner is going to shave off a little bit of time. Is it a perfect race? No, because you didn't follow the line. You cut a corner. Well, it's the same kind of thing. If you go fast sometimes, you can and will cut corners. And that doesn't exactly equate to good anymore, does it? So then you come to the concept of cheap. Now, cheap is one of those things that most people are attuned to, especially when it comes to, living in our consumeristic economy that we have. The idea of cheap is something we care deeply about, because I want to get as much bang for my buck as I possibly can. So I want to have as little money invested as possible. So what does it take for me to get it cheap? So the cheap becomes, pretty easy, to see why people would want it, but it also becomes harder and harder to obtain. Costs of everything else goes up, the cost of labor, the cost of materials, whatever the thing happens to be. Even like if I'm typing things on a computer, I'm doing a project on a computer, computers aren't cheap. Internet service isn't cheap. Everything has to be paid for, and therefore there's a cost associated with it. And then on top of that, I'd like to have some profit, just like anyone else would. I'd like to have more. So the question then becomes, well, how little profit am I willing to take? 10% profit, 30% profit, 100% profit. What's my typical going rate, and what am I willing to cut back on? So it's just like anybody else doing any other thing. You know that you have all your bills, like whether you have a mortgage or rent, whether you have a car payment, insurance payments, utilities, all that kind of stuff. You have to make X dollars per month. And if this project's going to take me a month, I need to have at least that much money to pay all my bills, and then whatever else to live off of, for food and anything else that I might need, or any kind of errors or problems, or plus to put money away, even savings. So I have this window of understanding of how much money I need to make for this project. And the client is going to want it as cheap as possible. Understandably so, because I would like my stuff as cheap as possible. So then we have to negotiate of what cheap looks like. And then, like we talked about with the others, what's going to happen if I get too cheap? If I know I'm making a good money on this project, I might care and pour a little bit more effort into the project. Make sure that it's exactly as you, the client, wanted. If I feel like I'm being manipulated by a cheapskate, and I've taken it and I start getting resentment that I took it for so cheap, I might start caring less about the project and caring less about the fidelity to that project and getting it getting exactly right for the client, just getting it out the door. So we can see good, fast, cheap. All three things are important. All three things are understandable from both the production side and from the consumption side. But why do you only get to pick two? So good, fast, and cheap. Why can't I have all three? Well, as we kind of discussed with the cons, with each one, you can start seeing how they would start stacking up. Because if I want it good and I want it fast, what's going to have to happen? Well, if I want it good and fast, I'm going to either be like something I'm super specialized in and no one else can do it that fast for that and that good. Therefore, you're going to pay a premium because I'm that good to get it done that fast. Or I'm going to have to go out and hire maybe a subcontractor to help me with the project to get it done fast. Because if you need a certain thing done by a certain day, I might not be able to do that by myself. I might need 2 or 3 extra workers to help with that. I used to work for a company when I was doing commercial writing and things like that, and marketing communication stuff. And we would have people inside our own organization say, hey, we'd like to put together a catalog of material that we can turn around and use to sell. And could you just throw that together? It's like, that's like a 3-month project. They're like, really? I thought we could have it like in their time. It's like most people have no clue what it takes to do things. Like how long, you just, press print catalog button on the keyboard and boop, and here's your catalog exactly as you want it. It takes a long time to do layout and to write the copy and to get everything all set up and organized, to have a very rough draft that needs to be then proofed and then manipulated and changed and tweaked and then everything like that. So one person to do it, that's months of time. 10 people do it, might cut down to weeks. But if you want it in a week's time, well, then that's going to take a lot of extra resources, and you might have to hire a bunch of more people to make it happen in that short period. It's kind of like whenever you see those advertisements for building a garage within a day. I mean, you think that's impressive. I mean, how do you build a garage in one day? I mean, it must be super easy to build a garage. Well, no, they show up with a crew of 10 plus people and throw it up real quickly. And the issue is, if you cut back to just 2 people working on it, it might take 2 or 3 weeks to build it. And something's going to happen in the process of doing it that quickly. So something has to give. So if you want it good and fast, the cheap goes out the window. And the same thing kind of happens as well whenever you want it, like say, good and cheap. So I want it good and cheap. Well, then fast goes away, and you're left with the idea of, well, I can do some work with it whenever I get a chance. I can poke at it and work on these other things that pay me well, that I have to focus on. And yours, I'll get to it when I can. I'll do a good job on it, but I'll get to it when I can, because it's not a high priority, because it's going to be cheap for me. So I'm not going to care as much to jump right on it and get it done. So if you need something and you're like, take your time with it, I don't care when it's done, I need it done, but I don't have a lot of money to pay you, so by all means take care of it when you can. Then it gets pushed off to the side, do the major project and poke at it now and then. Now you can have it good and cheap. Fast has to go out the window. So whenever you're sitting around and thinking, well, how do I approach this as a consumer, you should be thinking that things can be good, fast, cheap, but you get to pick two. So do you want it cheap? Well, then you should realize that you're either going to get fast and mediocre quality, or you're going to get a good quality, but it's going to take a long time. So you should be mindful of that. If you want it fast, you should realize that, look, it's not going to be cheap, or it's not going to be good. Something's going to give. And, if you've got to realize that something will go by the wayside. You can't have all three unless the other person's just, mindlessly abusing themselves, which is why it's also important to think of these three things if you're the producer. So if you're the creator, if you're the one who's building the content, building the project, doing the physical labor, doing the mental labor, whatever it is, know your worth. If you were to do something good, you know how good you are. And only you can answer that question, how good you really are, and how you got there, how much money you spent, how much time you spent, and what you're worth. You should know. You should have a good idea what you are worth. So that's the good part. The fast part, well, how fast can you reasonably work without sacrificing the good? What's the fastest you can go without sacrificing the good? So that's a key thing to think about. How well can you do this project and how quickly, so you don't overpromise. And then the cheap side of things too comes into play. You know what your bills are. You know what you need to survive, what you want to put away into savings or into investments, or maybe you have a new thing, a new tool, a new piece of equipment, or whatever you want to buy, new computer, new camera, new hammer, whatever the thing happens to be. You need to pay for that somehow, so you need some level of profit to be able to set aside to buy new equipment. So again, your costs. So if you're going to go cheap on things, that there's going to be a damage to yourself. So it's important, if you're the creator, to know your worth, to how good, how fast, how cheap. And if you can answer those things comfortably, if you can answer those three things well, then you know you, and you know what you're able to produce and how you can how quickly you can move through those things. That way you can probably bid things, and then you can also comfortably walk away if you can't get a bid, or if you can't please a client, because there are lots of clients out there who want all three, and you should know that you can't deliver it and feel comfortable to walk away, no matter how badly you might need that project. There's going to be a problem if you have someone who wants and demands all three. I mean, everyone's going to want all three, but if they demand all three, that's the project where you end up having trouble after trouble after trouble on down the line. So don't put yourself in that position in the first place. Move on, focus your efforts towards finding good quality clients. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you very much for tuning in. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate the help with the YouTube algorithms. And if you didn't like what you heard today, that's okay. Thanks for tuning in anyway and hanging out with me this long. But I will see you next time on Communicology.